Before sunrise, the old cargo port trembled as a massive shadow moved behind the high, sealed gates. The faint hum of the city far away did nothing to calm the emptiness that hung over the place. Crates were stacked unevenly, their edges worn and chipped. Rust crawled along the metal surfaces, and the air smelled of oil, dust, and old rain. For most people, this port was forgotten, abandoned, and dangerous. For Aaron Vale, it was a daily route of routine and quiet devotion. Aaron was a thin, quiet man with a steady step and hands hardened by work, not by weapons. Each morning, long before the sun spilled its light across the docks, he arrived carrying a crate of food scraps. Not for people, not for profit, but for something few could believe existed. He paused at the gate and looked through the thick bars, eyes scanning the shadowed interior. There she was. Olith Prime, the aging dragon, lay curled among broken crates and scattered tools. Her scales had lost their shine over the centuries, dulled to soft gray with streaks of silver. Her wings were folded neatly against her body, and a thin wisp of smoke curled from her nostrils, disappearing into the cold morning air. She lifted her great head as Aaron approached and regarded him with eyes older than many worlds, yet calm, patient, and aware. Most would have trembled at such a sight. A dragon of her size, her age, her reputation, could crush any human in moments. Yet Aaron never wavered. He set down the crate and began organizing the scraps, chunks of old meat, pieces of dried vegetables, small vials of nutrients he had mixed carefully for her. Olith watched, flicking her tail lazily but never rising. Unseen by Aaron, small drones hovered high above, their cameras blinking red. A group of armored guards waited at a distance, motionless, watching his every move. Behind them, in a glass-walled chamber, lawyers in crisp suits typed rapidly into holo terminals, noting every sound, every gesture. Their faces were tense. They had expected him to stumble, to fear, to provoke the dragon in some way. They had not expected calm, steady care. "Good morning," Aaron said softly, though he knew no one could hear him except the dragon. He hummed quietly as he cleaned the small feeding dishes, arranging food so that she could eat without lifting her massive body. Olith's nostrils twitched at the scent. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she shifted, curling her head closer to the food. The lawyers whispered among themselves. "Is he talking to her?" one asked. "Does he think she's listening?" "She is," said another quietly. "That is the strange part." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. None of them had ever seen a human interact with Olith this way. All the reports described her as violent, cunning, and unapproachable. Yet here he was, touching crates, setting food, speaking softly, and not a single claw or tooth was drawn in anger. Aaron worked methodically, as if the world outside did not exist. He did not glance at the cameras, did not acknowledge the guards. He simply moved with patience. Olith's eyes followed his every action, curious and careful. There was a faint rasp in her throat, almost like a sigh, as she lowered her head to eat. Hours passed unnoticed. The sun began to rise, spilling weak orange light across the port. Aaron added fresh water to a shallow trough, wiped dust from her scales, and even adjusted the broken panel of a wall to give her more comfort. The dragon shifted slightly, testing his intentions, but she did not strike. Finally, Aaron stepped back, wiping his hands on his worn trousers. He looked at her and smiled faintly. "Rest easy," he said. Then he turned and began walking back toward the city. As he left, the drones followed him with silent, mechanical precision. The guards whispered into communicators, their voices low. The lawyers typed urgently, piecing together reports, debates, and old records. They noted the unusual effect of his visits. Olith's vitals had improved. Her scales had begun to regain a subtle sheen. Her breathing was deeper, steadier. The human had no weapons, no authority, yet the dragon tolerated him. More than tolerated, she seemed to trust him. The lawyers argued quietly. "We need to move her to the safety of the capital," one said. "This is a liability." "She is no longer weak," said another. "And this human, he is a variable we cannot predict." The guards exchanged looks. "She could destroy him," one muttered. "Why hasn't she?" The answer was simple and terrifying, but none of them dared speak it aloud. Olith's trust in a human, her bond with Aaron, was something no law, no guard, no weapon could control. For centuries, dragons had ruled empires with fire and fear. Yet here was one who had chosen a human, not for strength, not for power, but for care, patience, and consistency. In the quiet of the rising sun, Aaron walked away from the port, unaware of the observers, unaware of the legal implications, unaware of the shifting balance in the galaxy. He only knew one truth: the dragon needed him, and he would feed her each morning, come what may. Behind the gates, Olith curled back into her resting position, smoke curling from her nostrils. She watched him go, her ancient mind recording the details of his every move. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, a spark of life returned to her tired eyes. For the first time in many long centuries, the dragon felt something she had not felt in a long time, a quiet hope that a human could be a friend, a caretaker, maybe even something more. The world outside was dangerous. The galaxy would not forgive weakness. Laws, guards, and powerful enemies waited for any slip. Yet here, in this forgotten port, a human and a dragon had found a secret, fragile, but real, that care could survive even in the shadows of fear. And that morning, as the sun painted the port in gold, the shadow behind the gates no longer trembled with menace, it waited patiently, watching a human leave, knowing he would return again. The dragon, known publicly as Olith Prime, was believed by most of the galaxy to be near death. Rumors spread for years about her weakened state, her failing fire, her fragile body. No one expected her to move, let alone act. She had been seen only from a distance, behind high walls and layers of protection, her roar mostly silent. Most people thought she was old, tired, and powerless. But Aaron Vale saw her differently. Every morning, he arrived at the old cargo port before sunrise, carrying his crate of food and tools. He did not rush, did not speak loudly, did not demand anything. He only moved carefully, placing scraps of meat and dried vegetables into the feeding bowls, mixing them with small vials of nutrients he had carefully prepared. Olith watched from her resting place, her massive head low, her eyes calm but alert. This morning, the sun was weak and pale. The air smelled of rain from the night before, wet metal and dust. Aaron wiped his hands on his trousers and stepped forward, bowing slightly before the dragon. "Good morning, Olith," he said softly. His voice was calm, steady, and it carried no fear. Behind the walls, the surveillance drones hovered silently, their blinking lights unnoticed. The guards observed from a safe distance, their armor catching the weak light. They whispered among themselves. "She should be dead," one said. "Why is he allowed this close?" The lawyers, watching from the glass chamber high above, typed notes furiously. They had spent years protecting the dragon's rights, controlling access, and keeping her alive by strict laws. Yet here was a human, touching crates, speaking softly, and the dragon seemed to accept it. The older lawyer, Mythical, leaned forward. "Her vitals," she whispered, "they improve when he is near. Her energy rises." Aaron did not notice any of this. He only focused on Olith. Carefully, he picked up a broken panel and repaired the corner of her resting area. The dragon's tail flicked lazily, her massive body shifting slightly as she tested him, but she did not attack. Slowly, she lowered her head toward the fresh food, sniffed the nutrients, and then began eating carefully, her jaws slow and gentle. Mythical and the other lawyers exchanged glances. "She should not be strong enough for this," Mythical said. "Her body is supposed to be failing. Why does she respond to him?" "Because he is not afraid," another lawyer said. "Not only that, he treats her like a living creature, not a weapon. He speaks to her as if she is someone who can listen." The guards murmured their disbelief. "She could destroy him in seconds," one whispered. "Why doesn't she?" Aaron moved around her carefully, adjusting a water trough and cleaning dust from the scales on her legs and neck. The dragon followed every movement with her ancient, wise eyes. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her breathing grew deeper. Her tail thumped against the metal floor with a steady rhythm. Something was changing. A week passed like this. Each morning, Aaron came to feed her. Each morning, Olith allowed him closer. Each morning, the drones recorded changes that no one could explain. Her scales glimmered faintly, her eyes sparkled a little brighter, and her massive wings twitched with strength. She even lifted her head higher when he approached, as if she trusted him more each day. The lawyers began to argue. "We cannot ignore this," Mythical said urgently. "She is responding to him. She is stronger than we believed. Perhaps she chooses him." "Chooses him?" another lawyer asked sharply. "A dragon of her age, her power, chooses a human." "Yes," Mythical said. "And that changes everything. His presence is not a threat. It is stabilizing her." The guards watched silently. They had trained for centuries to protect her, but here was a human doing something no weapon or guard had ever done. He healed her, not with machines, not with medicine, but with care, patience, and trust. One morning, Aaron noticed a small cut on her front leg. It was barely visible, but he stopped immediately, gathering his tools and disinfectants. He knelt beside her, speaking softly. "Easy now, Orlith. Let me fix this. It won't hurt." The dragon watched, silent and still. She did not resist. She allowed him to clean the wound, apply a healing paste, and bind it carefully. For the first time, one of the guards whispered, "I have never seen her like this." "Never." "Neither have I," Mythical said. She typed furiously, noting how the dragon's vitals improved after every interaction. Her body seemed to recover faster, her breathing steadier, her energy returning. "This human, he is not a threat. He is helping her live." Aaron finished the treatment, stepped back, and smiled faintly. "There, all better. Rest now, Orlith." He did not know he was rewriting the story of a legend, a dragon whose life had been measured in centuries and feared across galaxies. The dragon blinked slowly, then curled back into her resting place. Smoke rose gently from her nostrils. For the first time in decades, her eyes held something soft, almost human: recognition, trust, and quiet appreciation. By midday, the port was empty. The drones hovered silently, the guards remained on alert, and the lawyers argued quietly in their chambers. They could not explain the bond forming before their eyes, and they could not ignore it. The dragon, far from dying, was thriving in ways they never imagined. "Perhaps," Mythical said softly, "the galaxy has underestimated the power of a human's care." And as the sun rose higher, Aaron walked home through quiet streets, unaware of the ripple his actions were creating. Behind him, Orlith rested, her body stronger, her spirit calmer, and her mind slowly beginning to trust a human in ways she had never trusted any being before. The world outside waited, full of rules, dangers, and threats. Yet inside the old cargo port, a human and a dragon had begun a secret story that no law, no guard, and no weapon could control. They had begun a bond that could rewrite what the galaxy believed about power, patience, and trust. A rival coalition filed an emergency claim, declaring Orlith Prime mentally unfit and demanding her assets and territory. The news spread across star systems like wildfire. Political leaders argued in crowded halls. Merchants whispered in markets. Soldiers prepared for action. They believed the aging dragon was weak, fragile, and easy to control. Few could imagine that a human named Aaron Vale had won her trust, that her strength had quietly returned, or that she would defend herself and him. Aaron learned about the claim through the port's old news terminal. He frowned, rubbing the back of his neck. "They think she can't decide for herself," he muttered. "They don't see what I see." His hands tightened around the straps of the crate he had brought that morning. Aaron had no army, no weapons, only care and patience. Still, he knew he could not let anyone take Orlith without a fight, even if that fight was subtle and careful. The cargo port, normally quiet, buzzed with tension. Surveillance drones that had once only observed now hovered in larger numbers. Guards, more alert than ever, patrolled the perimeter. Lawyers in distant glass chambers scrambled through ancient records, looking for any law that could stop the coalition. Every system knew the name Orlith Prime, every story painted her as old, helpless, and valuable. They were wrong. That evening, Aaron approached the gate carrying his crate. Orlith lay curled in the shadows, her scales dim in the fading light. Her eyes, however, glimmered with intelligence and wariness. She lifted her massive head at his approach. "They want to take everything from you," Aaron whispered, kneeling beside her. "But we'll figure this out. You're not weak. You're not theirs to control." Orlith blinked slowly. The dragon understood, in ways older than any language, that her safety and freedom depended on trust and timing. She did not move, but her tail thumped the metal floor in agreement, quiet and deliberate. By dawn, armored ships from the rival coalition appeared in orbit above the port. Their commanders expected resistance, yet they underestimated the situation entirely. Aaron's presence was unexpected. The dragon, far from frail, unfurled her wings slightly, casting shadows that trembled over the crates and rusted metal. The coalition sent a message demanding surrender. Aaron did not respond immediately. Instead, he continued arranging the feeding area and water trough, speaking softly to Orlith. "They don't understand you," he said. "They think fear controls you. But they forget something important. You choose." Orlith's eyes narrowed. Her long, curved horns glinted faintly in the morning sun. She rose slowly, muscles coiled beneath aged but strong scales. Her wings spread wide, shaking dust from the ceiling. The guards and drones recorded every move, yet none dared intervene. This was not an attack, it was a warning. The coalition ships fired warning pulses, small but powerful, meant to intimidate. Olitha's massive body did not tremble. Smoke rose from her nostrils, curling into the sky. Her deep, rumbling growl vibrated through the port, not loud enough to destroy, but clear enough to tell anyone nearby that she was alive, aware, and in control. Aaron stepped closer, his hand brushing against a section of her thick scales. "Easy," he said softly. "We don't need to fight them. They just need to understand." Olith lowered her head slightly, as if listening. Slowly, deliberately, she stomped her front claw once, then twice, creating vibrations that ran through the port. The coalition ships faltered, sensing the strength and precision of the movement. No human or machine could challenge her in a direct strike. Back in the observation chamber, Mythical and the other lawyers watched in astonishment. "She's choosing him over centuries of fear," Mythical whispered. "She trusts a human to protect her more than she trusts guards, laws, or power itself." The coalition attempted a landing. A team of elite soldiers descended, expecting a weak dragon, a frightened human, and a simple conquest. They were met instead with a careful, measured defense. Olith did not attack recklessly, but every step, every flap of her wings, shifted the environment to make any advance difficult. Crates fell, metal bent, smoke filled the air. Aaron moved quietly alongside her, signaling calm and strategy rather than chaos. The soldiers froze. The dragon did not strike, but she did not allow them to move closer either. Aaron spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You are here to take what is not yours. Leave, and no one will be hurt. Understand this." For the first time, the soldiers hesitated. A dragon of her age and size, combined with a human who moved among her as if part of her own body, created a force no one expected. Behind the coalition, commanders scrambled to rethink their plan. They had underestimated both the dragon and the human. Hours passed like this. The coalition sent messages, threats, and ultimatums. Aaron and Olith stayed calm. They moved carefully within the port, avoiding unnecessary damage, but each step was a clear message: neither fear nor force would control them. The dragon's strength had returned quietly, nurtured by the human's care, and she now acted with precision and intelligence that no enemy could predict. As night fell, the coalition ships slowly withdrew, realizing the dragon was far stronger than they had assumed. Aaron tended to Olitha's minor scratches from the day's disturbances, speaking softly, "See? They can't take you. Not now. Not while we stand together." Olitha's eyes reflected the stars above. Her trust in this human had grown beyond simple survival. He had not fought her, bribed her, or commanded her. He had cared for her, fed her, and treated her like more than a weapon. That choice, that quiet bond, was stronger than any law, stronger than any army. Mythical leaned back in her chair, amazed. "The galaxy thinks it rules with power," she said. "But here, care, trust, and patience have won." Aaron did not know he had rewritten expectations across the stars. He only knew one thing: the dragon trusted him. And in that trust, there was a quiet strength that no enemy, no law, and no coalition could destroy. Together, they had survived the first real test, and both knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges. Yet for the first time, the old dragon moved not with fear, but with purpose, guided by a human who believed in her more than the galaxy ever had. Legal courts across star systems froze as Olith Prime spoke publicly for the first time in generations. The sound of her voice was deep, resonant, and filled with centuries of experience. It carried across the communication networks, reaching billions of beings who had long believed that the dragon was weak, dying, or silent. Her words were measured, calm, and impossible to ignore. "I choose Aaron Vale as my caretaker," she said, her voice rumbling like distant thunder. "This role is older than any empire, older than law or fleet. He will act for me, care for me, and protect what I have entrusted to him." The announcement shocked governments, merchants, and rulers alike. For centuries, dragons had been feared, obeyed, and controlled through force. They were symbols of power, sometimes worshipped, sometimes conquered. No dragon had ever publicly declared a human as a partner in any official sense, let alone as a caretaker. The galaxy struggled to process the idea that a human could hold such authority, not through weapons or politics, but through trust, care, and respect. Aaron stood at the cargo port, the rising sun casting long shadows across the rusted metal and scattered crates. He had expected nothing. He had fed the dragon, tended to her wounds, and spoken softly, never imagining that his quiet devotion could reach this far. And now, he realized, the galaxy was listening. Olitha's guards lowered their weapons slightly, though still alert. They had always followed her orders, but now they had to reconcile centuries of protocol with this new reality. A dragon declaring a human as her chosen caretaker disrupted every rule they had been taught. Some whispered among themselves, disbelief in their voices. She really chose him, one asked. Yes, said another. And there is no law that can challenge this bond. Not yet. Mythical, the dragon's lawyer, typed furiously, ensuring that the records reflected Olitha's declaration. This is unprecedented, she murmured. A human, recognized officially by a dragon. No court has ever handled such a case. We must protect this choice, not challenge it. Across the galaxy, politicians scrambled. The rival coalition that had tried to claim Olitha's assets was outraged. Their fleets were prepared for a simple relocation, but now they faced a dragon in full authority, with a human by her side who commanded her trust. Messages poured in from star systems demanding explanations. Nothing in their treaties or laws prepared them for this situation. Erin knelt before Olith, arranging her food and checking her scales as she observed the chaos. It's okay, he said softly. I didn't do anything special. I just cared for you. That's all. Olith tilted her massive head, nostrils flaring slightly, as if responding to him. She lowered her claws to the ground, a subtle gesture that suggested agreement. She had survived centuries of threats, wars, and neglect. She had been powerful, feared, and lonely. Now, through this simple human who came every morning, she had found not just care, but partnership. The coalition's fleets hovered near the system, unsure how to act. They feared her strength, yet they were bound by law to respond to any dragon who spoke officially. They realized that attacking her now could be interpreted as aggression not against a beast, but against an established ruler who had formally recognized a human as her caretaker. The media across star systems broadcasted images of Erin at the cargo port, kneeling beside the massive dragon as sunlight glinted off her silver-gray scales. Headlines screamed, "Human named caretaker of ancient dragon and eon of power shift, dragon declares human partner." Mythical guided Erin through the legal implications. "The choice is binding," she said gently. "Olith has the authority. Your role as caretaker is recognized. You do not need to fight fleets or laws. You simply continue what you have been doing, caring for her." The coalition's leaders were forced to reconsider. Any aggressive action would risk massive political fallout, rebellion, and exposure of their own miscalculations. They were confronted not with a weak dragon and an ordinary human, but with a partnership forged through patience and trust, stronger than any fleet or treaty. Back at the port, Erin adjusted a feeding bowl. Olith lay beside him, massive wings folded, eyes calm and alert. She had survived the morning, the announcement, and the observation of the entire galaxy. Yet she seemed almost serene, as if she had been waiting for this recognition all along. Guards stationed around the port whispered quietly among themselves. "I never thought I'd see this," one said. "A human, recognized by a dragon. It's unbelievable." "Unbelievable," agreed another. "And yet, here it is." Olith shifted slightly, lowering her head until it rested near Erin's shoulder. She exhaled smoke gently, the gesture soft and almost intimate. Erin ran his fingers along her scales, feeling their strength and warmth. He realized that her power had always been there. It had simply been waiting for someone to treat her as more than a weapon, more than a legend. Across the galaxy, rulers and lawmakers convened emergency meetings. They debated what to do, how to respond, and whether such a bond could be challenged. The consensus was clear: no one could dispute a dragon's choice, and no one could override centuries of authority without risking massive consequences. Erin did not care about politics, fleets, or the media. He only cared about the dragon beside him. "We'll be fine," he whispered. "They can't take this from us. Not while we trust each other." Olitha's eyes, ancient and knowing, met his. For centuries, she had trusted no one fully. Now, she trusted a human completely. The galaxy could watch, the courts could debate, and fleets could hover in the sky. But inside the old cargo port, a quiet bond had been formed that no law, weapon, or empire could undo. As the sun rose higher, painting the port in gold, the dragon and her human caretaker remained calm. The galaxy had taken notice, and everything was changing, but their focus remained simple and true. Olitha's choice was final. Erin's devotion had been recognized. Together, they faced the future, not as legend and servant, but as partners bound by trust, patience, and care. And for the first time in generations, a dragon spoke to the galaxy and the galaxy listened. Months later, the containment zone was gone. The old cargo port had been rebuilt into a simple but safe open space where humans and dragons could meet without fear. Olith Prime no longer hid behind gates or walls. She moved freely, her massive wings stretching in the morning sun, her silver-gray scales glinting as she stepped carefully among the rebuilt platforms and walkways. Yet she did not rule through fear anymore. Her power was still immense, but she no longer demanded obedience. Instead, she commanded respect through her presence, her wisdom, and the quiet strength she shared with a human who had earned her trust. Aaron Vale still came every morning. He walked along the smooth paths, carrying tools, food, and water. Nothing had changed in his routine, except that now the world could see him. Ships from nearby systems hovered in orbit, sending diplomats, scientists, and observers. Yet Aaron paid them no attention. He focused entirely on Olith, on her needs, her comfort, and her quiet companionship. The galaxy had learned a new lesson. Power was not only fire and fear. It could be patience, care, and trust. Humans were not merely fragile beings to be protected or controlled. They were capable of shaping history in ways the strongest fleets and armies could not. Olith had shown this through her choice, but Aaron embodied it through action. Every day, his small deeds, feeding, cleaning, tending, speaking softly, echoed across systems as proof that compassion was a force stronger than domination. Olith moved among the people cautiously at first. Diplomats, scientists, and journalists kept their distance, but she allowed it. She lowered her massive head to acknowledge them, smoke curling gently from her nostrils, eyes calm yet watchful. For the first time in centuries, she met the galaxy as herself, not as a weapon or a ruler of terror, but as a being who could choose her own path. Aaron walked beside her, speaking softly. "They are here to learn from you, not to fight you," he said. "You don't have to prove anything with fire." She blinked slowly, her long eyelashes brushing her scales. It was a subtle gesture, but it was clear she understood. Olith had learned that strength did not need to intimidate, it needed to protect, to inspire, and to heal. News of the dragon's new life spread quickly. Young humans, curious and brave, traveled from faraway systems to visit the port. Some brought gifts, others offered tools or knowledge. Olith allowed them to approach, especially when Aaron was there to guide them. She interacted carefully, teaching them to respect her size and power, but also to see her as a living being with feelings, thoughts, and choices. Maris Cole and the other lawyers had rewritten the rules. Caretaker laws, previously unused, now carried real weight. Aaron's role was recognized officially, and other humans were slowly being considered for similar positions in other systems, though none had yet gained a dragon's trust as completely as he had. One afternoon, a group of children approached the port. They had traveled in small, unarmed ships, eager to see the dragon whose story had changed the galaxy. Olith lowered herself to the ground, folding her wings carefully, and allowed them to sit near her massive head. Her breath was warm but gentle, her eyes calm. Aaron knelt beside them, explaining how to interact respectfully. "She's not dangerous," he told them softly. "She's wise. She's powerful. But she trusts only those who treat her with care." The children's eyes widened as they reached out, gently touching her scales under Aaron's guidance. The dragon's rumble was quiet and steady, a sound of approval rather than warning. In that moment, the children understood something the galaxy had long forgotten. Strength could be gentle, and the bond between species could be deeper than fear. Meanwhile, fleets and governments adjusted to the new reality. Olith no longer needed armies to protect her. Her bond with Aaron and the quiet respect she inspired among humans and dragons was enough. Diplomatic envoys now treated her decisions with care, knowing that challenging her or him could have consequences no weapon could predict. One evening, as the sun set over the rebuilt port, Aaron sat beside Olith, polishing her scales and arranging her sleeping area. She leaned her massive head against the wall, smoke curling slowly from her nostrils. The port was quiet except for the distant hum of ships and the soft rustle of wind across metal and stone. "They don't understand yet," Aaron said quietly. "They see dragons as tools, humans as weak. But they will learn. You've shown them something they cannot forget." Olith's eyes followed the sun as it dipped below the horizon. She rumbled softly, a deep sound that resonated in Aaron's chest. It was not anger, nor warning, nor fear. It was acknowledgement. Approval. Connection. They had faced the galaxy together, and now they were shaping it together. Months passed, and the bond only grew stronger. Aaron remained humble, never seeking fame, never asking for titles or recognition. His reward was simple: the dragon's trust, her quiet companionship, and the knowledge that his care had saved and strengthened one of the most legendary beings in the galaxy. Orlith, in turn, grew more confident. She no longer needed to hide behind walls or guards. She moved openly among the rebuilt port, interacting with visitors when guided by Aaron, teaching them lessons of patience, respect, and trust. The galaxy watched, learned, and slowly began to change. Humans traveling between star systems now carried stories of Aaron and Orlith. These stories were not of conquest, not of war, not of fear, but of care, patience, and bonds that could rewrite history. Leaders and citizens alike began to see that humanity's quiet strength was more powerful than armies, that a single person could change centuries of expectation simply by showing respect and compassion. And in the middle of the port, under the open sky, Aaron and Orlith sat together. He fed her, spoke softly, and tended to her needs, as he had for months. She rested beside him, massive, wise, and serene, no longer a hidden weapon, no longer a creature of fear, but a living example of what trust between species could achieve. The galaxy had changed. Empires had paused, fleets had reconsidered, and law had adapted. All because a human had chosen to care, and a dragon had chosen to trust. And in that quiet, golden light, Aaron realized something simple but profound. Humans did not conquer dragons with fire. They changed them with patience. They healed them with trust. They became part of a legend, not by force, but by heart. The future was no longer written in fear. It was written in care, in connection, and in the quiet, unshakable bond of a human and a dragon who had rewritten history together.